This week, we are bringing you part 3 of the Australian bush murders. Thank you for hanging in with us, and welcome to the dramatic conclusion.
I love a trilogy.
Do you?
Yeah, I think they're awesome.
Oh, well, that's surprising to me.
Well, I mean, not with your dumbass podcast. Just kidding, I love it. Just talking about movies, you know.
Oh, great.
I guess I was talking about movies.
Well, I appreciate your candor and, what would I say? Scatterability. All right.
I think that might have been your own little form of scatterability right there. Throwing stones, glass houses, all that kind of stuff. Okay, here we go.
Remember, our main source for this episode was that awesome book, In the Dead of Night by Greg Hadrick. This is a pretty, wild and sprawling case. Some of the other extra tidbits I did get from, newspaper articles. Greg Hadrick's book is, I think, a little more upscale or
you needed some
professional.
of the dirty details.
The sunscreen jacking off thing. I had to go through and be I was what did they find that was so scandalous?
Yeah.
And I found it.
I was wondering if the sunscreen jack off thing was in that photo essay you said you came across.
No, I did some digging. There's just certain aspects they're most people want to say body or he was saying inappropriate things, but I kept being what are the inappropriate things? And I did end up doing some deep dives to find what the inappropriate things were.
Of course you did.
It's not that they don't exist out in the world, it's just that people don't think that other people want to hear about it.
Yeah.
But to me, that's the meat and potatoes of what we're doing here.
Okay.
All right. Remember, we're just doing a bulk recording of a 3-part episode. But there's no incentive for you to sign up for Patreon at this point.
No, that's not true. Because if you like what you listen to, if you're oh my God, I'm into the 3rd part, these guys are great. Or they are annoying to me and I don't like them, but for some reason I continue to listen, which I respect. I listen to podcasts like that where I'm this guy gets on my nerves, but I feel like I need to listen to it for whatever reason. So, I
don't want to do another ad for our podcast. We already did it.
You mean for our Patreon?
Yeah, we've
Boom,
done it
I just dropped the word anyways. Okay.
I know.
Right.
You cannot help it. It's compulsive. But I
Okay.
appreciate you. Because without you, I'd be homeless. You can be like my mom, too, who just always texts me, I'm listening to this episode, but never tells me whether or not she likes it.
That's great. It took us about 13 and a half years of creating art for your mom to pay attention to
Watch
something.
it. She really liked that web series we did.
And she's nice to me about my paintings.
Yeah, she's not nice to you. She likes your paintings.
Yeah.
So there are good things, but this one was really funny because also we've been doing podcasts for a really long time, years. And so she finally started listening to this one, even though, and then she'll text me, oh, I'm listening to this episode. She never says if she likes it. She doesn't even say good job or I'm having a fun time listening. Your mom's amazing.
My mom likes the show.
Yeah, your mom will be oh, that was so fun. We're listening to my friend. She's the perfect Muriel's Murders listener.
She's like a super spreader.
I love her. She's a super spreader event. Yeah. My mom has more of a pragmatic sort of, approach to it. I think she likes it or else she wouldn't listen to it.
Yeah, no one listens to podcasts that they don't like, even if they're annoyed by it for some reason.
No, she likes it. She just she just has very blunt text.
You're my daughter. Okay.
It's true. It's true. My brother and I joke about that all the time. I love you, Mommy.
If you're listening.
All right. This is a true story involving murder, violence, drugs, adult themes, etc. So if any listeners are like Nick and they don't want to hear about this story, go listen to a different podcast.
This is the 3rd of a 3-parter. You should have already listened to the first 2 parts, so you don't deserve any warnings at this point in your life. So you get what you get.
All right, Nikki, are you ready to hear this story?
No.
Too bad. Let's get started. On the morning.
I know. Was that your best Addams Family impression? Or
I don't know where that I don't know where that came from, to be honest. All right. On the morning of November 22nd, 2021, Greg Lynn got out of bed before dawn, packed some guns, and left before dark for a solo camping trip in the Grampian Mountains west of Melbourne. Now, remember, in the last episode, investigators prepared to execute Plan A, to call and interview every single person associated with Greg Lynn. Because remember...
Yeah, as soon as he's out of cell phone contact, yeah.
Well, because the warrants are running out.
Yeah.
And his job has called him back to fly airplanes. And he might be a psychopath. So they don't really want him to do that. They'll blow the lid off the investigation. The only chance they have of solving the investigation is a confession.
Yeah.
So, they really don't want to tell his airlines about the thing, but they're going to have to tell him.
And they can't count on another bee sting attack.
No,
you know what
they
I mean?
can't. I mean, it could happen, but
can't count on it.
So everything is riding on this Plan A. They're going to call and interview every single person associated with Greg Lynn, implicate him in the murders of Carol Clay and Russell Hill, blow up his life while he's out in the bush, out of cell phone range, and later when he comes in and his life becomes in shambles and he gets all of his notifications and dings and rings and all that kind of stuff. Everyone blows up his phone. Mm-hmm. Greg Lynn was going to come crawling to the police to make a confession. Right. That's the plan.
Right.
But to the shock of police, Greg did not go west to the Grampian Mountain Range. He headed east, directly back to the Onondaga Valley.
Scene of the crime.
So somehow investigators weren't prepared for this. I feel like, of course, he lied to his wife and decided to go back to the crime scene and one last time instead. Mm-hmm. But, I wrote this episode lying in my bed drinking iced coffee. And right now, I literally don't even know which way is east from where I'm sitting. So whatever, bro. I think obviously he's going to go do this other thing, but what? I don't know anything. The real point is that police freaked him out too much with that 60 minutes thing, right?
Yeah.
In the last episode, we talked about how they arranged this Truman Show-esque pre-planned 60 minutes episode specifically for Greg to freak him out. And then for the first time, they showed the images that they had the photographs of Greg's car publicly saying yes, this is the vehicle of our primary suspect.
Right.
So they thought they'd goad him. Instead, they freaked him out. So Greg, he was starting to unravel. And, they have his whole car bugged so they can hear the entire thing. They can see the entire thing. He's hinting at some suicidal ideation. He's talking about leaving his wife to care for his kids, how a snake bite would be a good way to go, rambling, saying stuff like, quote, "I think she knows I'm on the way up one of the pages of the final chapter," crying, talking in the past tense. Escalating, right? Which is his jam in the car. Outside the car, he's a very composed, calm pilot guy who's calm under pressure. And somehow inside the car in this capsule, he is just all the feelings all at once. Right. Punching the radio, hating Beyonce, barking at dogs, jacking off with sunscreen, just the whole nine, right? So he's freaking out in the car. So Plan A was kind of out the window. Now they were dealing with this urgent, suicide-tinged breakdown, and investigators had to pivot to a barely formed Plan B, which was basically send in someone else. So they ended up setting in a special ops group to try and contain the situation. They wanted to keep Greg from hurting himself, obviously, but they were also worried this whole thing was just going to end up in some sort of bloody, horrible shootout, right? Sure. So Greg took a long time getting to the Onondaga Valley. He stopped for breakfast and lunch. And then by the time he got to the Zika Spur track, the track that Russell Hill carved out himself, it was already afternoon, and he didn't really have time to set up camp in the valley before it got dark. So he pulled over a little sooner over at Arbuckle Junction. And then meanwhile, since the beginning of the day, Special Ops had been stalking Greg. So they already had people in the valley stalking Greg on 4-wheelers. They had been trailing him all day with an airplane. They had a bunch of copters, like police cops with police.
They really better hope this is their guy at this point.
I know. They have police dogs ready to drop out of the helicopters, which I guess is a thing in Australia.
What? Damn parachute dogs?
Like some sort of crazy, scary Malamute dog that they launch out of these helicopters.
Now that's the animated movie I'm trying to see.
I could be sort of like saying
it.
something. But I think they did have dogs in helicopters. I don't know if they dropped the dogs out of helicopters. But they're in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, madness. It's all madness.
Okay. Falcon dogs. Okay.
But unaware of all that, Greg calmly set up camp. He made a steak. He started cleaning his guns. And as soon as he was surrounded by all of these secret special ops guys, Greg heard the iconic, the classic, police don't move. And he looks up, he sees, police dogs dropping out of the sky. Guys on 4-wheelers, this huge crew of special
Detective
ops.
Mountain Lion popping up.
And he sort of just remained nonchalant. He just calmly responded, well, what seems to be the problem? Before he was taken down and arrested. Greg Lane was arrested and charged with murder that same day, and he spent the next 4 days in interviews with police without a lawyer present. Now, this whole series of interviews was pretty controversial in hindsight. Greg had a lawyer who he had only met over the phone. She wasn't in the room with him. And his lawyer told him to respond, no comment to all the questions, but Greg was gonna Greg. He couldn't help trying to take over the narrative, and he kept slipping up and answering questions. And investigators really exploited that, like subtly pushed him to ignore legal advice. And a judge would, just for the record, later call their conduct during the interviews appalling.
Mm-hmm. Well, because they got to play hardball because they don't really have much.
They do. That's the whole point.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They don't have much. They got to play hardball, but they did kind of like ethically, maybe very gray, super overstep their situation.
Right.
Anyway, Greg started off calm as a psychopath, and the first thing he said after initially being read his rights was, quote, I would like to call my wife, but not now. I'd like to, sort this out and then tell her that you've made a mistake and you've let me go and I can go back to the camp. He's a confident guy.
He wants to go back to the camp, too.
He's not even he's like, this isn't even a blip for me.
Yeah.
That's where he's at. So the next day, Greg spoke to his lawyer over the phone, who's told him, hey, stop talking, right? Don't do it.
Uh-huh.
Respond, no comment to every question. But Greg decided he was going to go along with the questioning anyway. He actually told the investigators, quote, I say straight out that the legal advice was contrary to what I thought was a good idea. But the legal advice is just to say no comment. So he just explained that. But Greg's a control freak. He didn't like doing what the lawyer told him to do. Interviewers knew that, so they kept kind of going at him, right? Mm-hmm. And he struggled like that shaving the haircut bit from Roger Rabbit, right? Yeah, so he's Roger Rabbit hiding behind a wall with this evil dude knocking over and over again. Shave and a haircut, right? And
Roger Rabbit has to finish it off.
He really has to finish it off. Yeah. And, so saying no comment to everything when he really wanted to comment was excruciating. Uh-huh. And pretty soon, Greg's instincts real kicked in. He couldn't help it, tried to slick talk his way out, breaking out of the wall, screaming, 2 bits, right? It's all for you, baby.
What a great act out, Muriel. Yeah, it's like masterpiece theater over here.
So he started contradicting his original story, over-explaining himself, arguing about how the investigators were reading the maps. He would say something and then add no comment as if he was like negating it or something. Okay, and police kept on it, oh, man, it's your story, Greg. It's not your lawyer's story, Greg. You're the pilot here, man. She's the stewardess,
They really say that?
They did kind of use that. That language.
Was there like a character of a detective or a lead investigator that emerged in this book that you just sort of like didn't include in this, or like?
Not really. I mean, part of what happens when you do these condensed versions of stories is that they tend to be, unless there's been a couple like where the character of the investigator is so great, or there's one dauntless investigator that handles the whole thing. But when you have like a team, you're adding kind of like you almost have to have a whole other hour to kind of like explain everybody's rank and role and how they enter and exit,
Yeah, right.
So unfortunately that's usually what I sacrifice. But in the room, at least with these guys, there were two people interviewing him, and Greg liked one and hated the other guy.
Oh, good cop, bad cop.
It was, but they weren't really being good cop, bad cop. Greg was just being like, you, not you. I'm done. Okay. All right. So they're working it. And then the hotcakes dropped. Police showed Greg the cell phone records and video footage of his car in granular detail for the first time. The only car captured in the area at the exact time Russell's cell phone pinged for the last time was Greg's Nissan Patrol. And Russell, from the photographs, certainly wasn't in the passenger seat with Greg getting a ride into town, although he may have been stuffed in Greg's trailer. Now, with this sort of showing all your cards thing, this biggest piece of information that they have, Greg stopped talking. He was clinging to the no comment thing like a drowning woman on a door floating in the water after the Titanic sunk. Investigators encouraged Greg. They said, this is your opportunity, Greg. We're not here to sink you. We're here to obtain the truth, and the truth will make a massive difference to the outcome in the end. But Greg was not talking. And investigators finally, they just had nothing left. They couldn't wring blood out of a stone. They had no more strong circumstantial evidence to surprise and torture him with. Without a confession, they didn't have a case. Investigators were about to resort to appealing to Greg's humanity, which really they were feeling was not going to work. Beg them to show investigators the bodies for the family's sake, sort of like grasping at the last straw of whether or not he's a good man. When a crack opened up and daylight came through. See, they took a break from all the questioning. And when they took a break, Greg spoke with his lawyer again, and he came back in the room and said he was ready to talk. Only through his lawyer, but he was ready to give a statement of his versions of events the night Carol and Russell disappeared. So, what? Investigators thought they lost everything, but Greg couldn't help it. Shaving a haircut 2 bits, man. He couldn't help it. He just wanted to talk, to set the record straight, to get some control back. And from there, it was easy to convince Greg to ignore his lawyer's advice. Yeah. And just tell the story directly to investigators. Why wait for the lawyer,
dude? Let's just go for it.
Come on, man. Which again, pretty bad form, guys, but it worked. And on day 4, Greg Lynn made his confession. And he started his confession with, quote, well, the assumption is that, I'm the villain. In actual fact, I think I'm the victim of all of this.
Yeah. Because I had the horrible circumstance of killing someone and hiding their bodies and lying about it.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
According to Greg, he left for the Alpine National Park on March 16th, 2020 for a solo hunting trip, as he was wont to do. And on the 18th, he entered the Onondaga Valley. And yes, he was the sweaty, redhead-faced man in shorts and rubber boots who spoke with the guy spraying blackberries.
And the singlet. Don't forget the singlet.
Wearing the singlet. And then, the guy pointed him to Buck's camp. He went, set up his camp at Buck's camp, and he went deer stalking, looking to see if he could find any deer trails and poop and all that kind of, huntery stuff. So according to Greg, on the afternoon of the next day, 2 vehicles, they came recklessly speeding into camp. The white Land Cruiser stopped at the campsite, and then the other vehicle parked a ways up closer to the weed sprayers. So those guys were our mushroom picking, drag racing Eastern European friends.
We remember that.
Who had really described a much tamer version of that whole interaction of like friendly drag race. Then they would try to find some mushrooms. Greg said of Carol and Russell, quote, I saw them pull up. I remember saying, as he came in at quite a high speed into a stop, she looked quite alarmed in the car, and he jumped out. He was very jovial. Yak, yak, yak.
I love how everyone just like goes up to the woods and then hates every other person that's also there.
He said, quote, I thought, well, there's, hundreds of other places to camp, but you want to camp here? It's a free country. You can do whatever you like. Fine. I would have preferred to have it by myself, but it doesn't bother me. And then he said, Thursday was uneventful. I didn't see them at all. So the next day, Friday, March 20th, Greg used the outhouse that was at the campsite and came face to face with a massive huntsman spider, the worst. And then he got ready to stalk some deer. He said, good morning to the couple. And Greg said, quote, Mr. Hill told me that he'd been, he'd built a track into the Zika spur and la, la, la. And he'd been there many times. And then Greg got his guns together. And Russell, he started up another conversation. So according to Greg, quote, according to Greg, Russell said, quote, oh, wait, this quote is actually really difficult. So this is what Greg told police about Russell. He said that, and this is quite unusual. When I first saw him on the Thursday, he was quite cordial. But on this occasion, he said that his words were he didn't mind the deer and that he was actually out there to remember a colleague who is a friend of his who recently was killed deer hunting. And he was smirking as he said it. And then she piped up behind, accidentally killed, and he just continued staring at me. I don't know. Beats me. So he's like, this guy's messing with me, da-da-da-da-da. And he's just like, so I just packed up my guns and I went looking for those deer. Greg said he didn't find anything. So later in the day, he walked back to the camp and like a responsible gun owner, there's all these rules about guns in the valley and campsites where you can hunt, where you can't hunt. And so like he, in his interview, was like super careful to talk about like how incredibly responsible he was with his guns. So he's like very technical about always mentioning like, and then so he goes, he's walking back to the campsite like a responsible gun owner. He unloaded his gun on the way and put it on safety. And then he heard something strange. Quote, I could hear this buzzing sound. I thought I'd stepped on a bee's hive or a wasp's nest or something. So he kept hearing it. And if he truly thought it was bees, I mean, what terrible luck, right? Because he just got medically cleared to fly after his last bee attack.
He almost got my girl,
Yeah, seriously. Nice, Nick. Good. Anyway, it wasn't bees. Greg said, quote, I looked up and it was a bloody drone right above my head, and that was bizarre. And then as I looked up, I only had gazed on it for a couple of seconds, and then whoosh, moved, like gone. And I thought, all right, what's this all about?
everyone's just like, yeah, there was a drone. I get that
He's
it's annoying,
very
but it's
dramatic.
like, what's this all about? What could this be? It's like, yeah, someone has a drone and they're using it.
Yeah, that's how the whole interview is. I cut this down quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man. So Greg said he came into camp still not knowing who was flying the drone, and he saw Russell with his controller in his hand playing with the drone. And Greg said he was pissed. Drones are flying cameras. Why was Russell filming him? So we went back in his camp and he sat for a minute and he said, quote, then I decided to go and find out what this drone incident is all about. So I walked up there unarmed and I asked him why was he using the drone? And he said he didn't like deer hunters and that he had some video footage of me now hunting, close to the camp. And I said, I wasn't. I was right up the valley, but he's got pictures of me with the rifle in hand close to the camp. And he said he was going to take those pictures to the police. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. And he said, well, I could just say that you shot through the camp. And I didn't. So I think the whole purpose of it was he was just wanting me to go. So in response, Greg went back to his truck, very calm, opened all the doors, and started blasting music as loud as he could while making his dinner.
Yeah.
The loudest music he could find, the most aggressive, full volume.
Oh, I really wish it was Beyonce.
And he kept,
what if he secretly loved Beyonce?
nobody would tell me what it was, and I'm mad about it. He's like, my generation's music. And I was like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Like an Australian 54-year-old, I was just like
it could be anything.
Really, I can't guess. So,
but probably what he's saying is it's probably some rock or
metal
alternative thing that would make an old person more upset than other kinds
probably
of music.
not like classical music or something like that.
Right. He's not bumping Frank Sinatra.
Yes. So he keeps blasting away into the night, makes his dinner, eats his dinner, sits back, looks at the stars. And after a while, he hears something above the music, a little rustling. So in all his righteous indignation, Greg, the responsible gun owner, had accidentally left his new laser-scoped rifle and loaded magazine in his open truck. And according to Greg, Russell, who hadn't handled a gun in about 30 years, and as far as anyone knew, had never used a gun that required a magazine, grabbed the rifle, unlocked all the safety features, and loaded the magazine all in the dark in a matter of seconds. Greg said when he demanded the rifle back, Russell shot a couple rounds into the air and Greg was scared for his life. According to Greg, the men struggled over the gun and Russell's finger was on the trigger when the gun went off, shot through the side mirror of Russell's truck and hit Carol Clay in the head, killing her instantly. Greg said Russell let go of the gun.
Sorry. Who's he saying had the trigger who had the trigger?
Russell.
Okay.
He's not irresponsible enough. He was grabbing the barrel trying to get the gun away. He's not irresponsible enough to have his finger on the trigger, but Russell did. So then Russell shot Carol in the head. Greg said Russell let go of the gun at that point. Greg took it back. He discharged the last round in the air, pulled out the magazine, and secured all his weapons in his truck. Then he shut the doors and shut the music off. But according to Greg, it wasn't over, because now, in the silence, out of the night, Russell came charging at him with a kitchen knife, screaming, "She's dead." Greg said Russell, who was right-handed, held the knife in his right hand, but proceeded to punch at him unsuccessfully with his left. Then the men wrestled to the ground, and Russell accidentally stabbed himself in the chest and died.
Okay.
So according to Greg Lynn, Russell Hill accidentally killed both Carol and himself over a camping spot. Greg explained he cleaned the bloody campsite, doused it in petrol, then burned it to the ground. Then he loaded Carol and Russell's body into his trailer and went to find a place to dump the bodies, not knowing Russell's phone was powered on and in his pocket. Now, Russell's phone was on more than likely because he was flying his drone. That's what you would use. Mm-hmm. And usually people turn their phones off to save batteries in the valley, which was probably why Greg didn't think to check if it was on. So Greg said he drove around all night trying to figure out where to dump Carol and Russell, and ended up taking them into a deserted road covered in leaves and fallen trees, and just kind of covered them with leaves and branches and left them there. Greg threw the phones in a lake and burnt up the knife. He came home on March 22nd, and he said, quote, "I didn't tell the wife anything about it, and the rest has been in the news." Greg had finished with, "It was wrong of me to hide those bodies like that. I should have came straight to the police, to you guys, but that was a mistake, clearly," unquote.
Does that add up right to where the cell phone pinged?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It matches all the evidence, and we'll get into that. So after the killings, Jetstar grounded all flights following the first, so going back to this timeline, directly after the killings, Jetstar then grounded all flights following the first lockdown in 2022. So Greg said he was strapped for cash in 2020. So going back to the timeline, Greg ditched the bodies, came straight home, and then the first of the major lockdowns happened in Victoria. So he was grounded. He lost his job. Greg said he was strapped for cash, and so he sold the trailer that he used to transport the bodies on an online platform called Gumtree on April 1st. That trailer was never found. He gave his car a dramatic new paint job a few weeks later, and he returned to the dump site a few times to check on the bodies, but nobody ever found him. Greg thought he was in the clear until police showed up to his house for that initial chat back in July of 2020. So as soon as the second lockdown ended in late October 2020, Greg went back and methodically burned the bodies to ash. He said he worked all through the night and then kind of tossed some of the tiny leftover pieces into the bush. He said, "There's nothing there. You won't find anything." So that was it. Greg felt really, really sorry for himself. His career was probably over, and he was going to have to drop out of the sporting clubs he'd recently joined. But it probably would have been just as bad as if he came forward in the first place. So really, he was just a victim of fate. Mm-hmm. After Greg's arrest, police found 8 guns, 20 knives, 2 hatchets, and a pickaxe at his home. Jetstar Airlines suspended and then fired him. After Greg's confession, forensic experts quickly found Greg had not burned the bodies to pure ash. There were plenty of human remains scattered around the dump site, intact enough to identify the remains through DNA as Russell and Carol.
R.I.P.
Greg Lynn was held in custody for 2.5 years before his trial in 2024. And the trial took place in courtroom 3 of the Victorian Supreme Court in a huge space with 30-foot ceilings. Greg Lynn was charged with murder. For some technical reason, manslaughter was off the table. So the jury had to decide whether Greg Lynn, without a shadow of a doubt, intentionally murdered Russell Hill and Carol Clay. With the exception of old Greg, there were no eyewitnesses to the crime. Forensic evidence didn't contradict his account of what happened that night, but it also didn't prove the Greg side story of how the killings took place, or the order in which Russell and Carol were killed was true either, right?
Right.
So in a way, it was a wash. It was kind of inconclusive. So the Crown, or the prosecutor, their hot take was probably Greg and Russell got into a fight that night over some sort of footage Russell captured with his drone, and Greg killed Russell. They believed Russell was killed first as being kind of the stronger, more wily of the two. And then Carol, as a surviving witness, was shot in the head and killed. They said the fight over the gun made zero sense. Russell Hill historically did not own or use guns. The last gun he shot was an extremely old shotgun he had inherited from his father. He would have had no idea how to deal with the state-of-the-art rifle with all these safety features, and like you needed to prime the rifle first, and he would have no idea how to load it in the dark.
Yeah.
You know, there was some sort of concession to the idea that Russell was a grumpy-ass bushman who wanted to be the boss of the woods and could have been antagonistic, fine. But Greg's gunfight story was pure fantasy. Unfortunately, they had absolutely zero evidence to back up that scenario. But the Crown asserted that the months that Greg spent hiding and burning the bodies and all the evidence was an admission of guilt in and of itself. As for the defense, they were like, Greg is just telling the truth. All the forensic evidence matched Greg's account. There was nothing to disprove the deaths were accidental. You know, there was nothing like, yeah, that's what I said. There was nothing to disprove the deaths were accidental. And that Greg simply hid and burned the bodies because he was the sole survivor of a life, bless you, my love.
Thank you. Because
he was the sole survivor of a life-ruining disaster. He was going to lose his job, his gun club membership, his house. Panic drove him to make those bad decisions and hide the bodies. And they all had to admit the forensics did match Greg's story. Human remains were exactly where he said they would find them. Burned under a carefully controlled fire, like Greg said. And also, you know, there were pieces of Carol's skull near the broken mirror at the campsite. In total, the Crown called 49 witnesses. The defense only called one. They called Greg himself. Greg spent 3.5 hours in the witness box talking about his life, his time working as an asparagus picker and Tasmanian river guide, his love of the outdoors, about how he was so kind that he would always help cabin crew clean up after a flight. He said, quote, most of the pilots just take off and leave the cabin crew to do that. But I always grab some gloves, go through, help them clean up. And he apologized, sort of, one of those classic non-apologies, like, I'm sorry you feel sad, saying, quote, all I can say to the family is that I'm very sorry for your suffering. But he firmly maintained his innocence. Russell stole his gun, accidentally shot Carol in the head, then accidentally stabbed himself with a kitchen knife. And that was that. On the witness stand, Greg did admit he didn't think Russell intended to actually shoot him. That more than likely Russell just wanted to scare him off. He said Carol was even getting involved in the scuffle, putting herself, you know, in the wrestling, yelling, Russell, stop it. But in the moment, Greg said he was, quote, scared shitless. And when asked by the Crown why he didn't just leave the situation and drive away, Greg said he hadn't even thought of it as an option. He said, quote, the first time I thought about leaving is as you're presenting it to me right now.
Damn.
And he said he realized he couldn't go to the police and report the incident without ruining his life. You know, he said, quote, we had a mortgage on our house. It would have caused severe financial hardship. It's a disaster, and it would have been a disaster if I had gone to police. At the time, it seemed magnitude of disaster was irrelevant.
I'm sorry. If that happens, you take one beat and you look at this crime scene, you see 2 dead bodies. If his story happened, then Russell's fingerprints would be all over the knife,
all over the gun. All the ballistics would match. All the evidence would be there. I agree. I'm not saying I don't agree with that. I think that there's definitely some sort of like, probably he would have lost his job anyway, just in the investigation and the charges. And then he might have been open to like manslaughter or like, you know, so.
I get it. But I mean,
I'm not sure it would be like as simple as like, oh, the police would show up and be like, well, obviously your story is true. Like, I think that there probably still was a chance he would lose his job. And I think also because technically what he says is the only crime he did was not secure his guns properly. He talked about this gun club membership like 1,000 times. So I think technically the only law that he admits to breaking is not securing his firearms, which would have gotten him kicked out of the gun club. So, you know, it's
all just such small potatoes compared to what happens when inevitably you get caught.
Yeah, but at the time, it seemed the magnitude of disaster was irrelevant.
All right.
The court was also told at the time that Greg's wife, Melanie, was now in a very difficult position of losing the house where she lived with Greg's adult sons from his first marriage. Closing arguments were to the point. The Crown thought obviously Greg Lynn was a liar and concocted a ridiculous story to cover up a blatant double murder. And Greg's defense pointed out that the Crown had no evidence to back up their half-baked theories. And Greg's version of events perfectly matched what remained of the forensic evidence. The jury deliberated for 7 days before coming to their verdict. They found Greg Lynn not guilty of the murder of Russell Hill and guilty of the murder of Carol Clay. And I think it all came down to like, no one actually knew how Russell died, but the evidence did show that Carol was shot in the head with Greg's rifle. As Greg, he didn't really react to the verdict, but as he was led away in handcuffs, he turned and told his younger son, "Don't stress." And man, throughout all of this, Russell's wife, Robin Hill, was such a class act. She said she tried to watch the verdict over Zoom, but she had to turn it off after Greg was found not guilty in the death of her husband. So she missed the guilty verdict for Carol's murder. She told ABC News, quote, "I didn't want to watch the second verdict in case it was the same, but I'm relieved that it was different. It was relief when the guilty came out. And it didn't matter which person it was. At least we got one guilty." Later, Robin told 7news.com that she hoped Greg Lynn, quote, "suffers for the rest of his life and has a lovely time in jail." And she said, you know, yeah, I know about the affair between Russell and Carol, you know, and she had made peace with it. You know, she said, quote, "Carol was a very nice lady. She was her own person. I knew they were together. We're all individuals. No one really owns us." After the verdict, both Carol and Russell's family made a joint statement thanking the jury and the prosecution for all their hard work. As of now, Greg Lynn's appeal hearing is scheduled for October 31st, 2025. If he loses his appeal, he faces at least 24 years in prison. Next week, just kidding. The end.
Man, that was a great story.
Yeah, it's sort of
Yeah,
fascinating.
R.I.P. Russell, R.I.P. Carol, and then what happened to those other 4 people?
Nothing. They're gone forever, and Button Man's still out there. I guess I read something kind
Button Man's chill.
Yeah.
Button Man didn't do anything.
I read a few things of people like locals being like, Button Man goes to the grocery store. He's nice.
You guys are way overblowing this whole Button Man
and
thing.
they blew up his spot. So then people were like going there trying to find who the Button Man was. And it was like, sucked. But he also owns a house in Melbourne. So he's probably doing fine.
Yeah, he's chill.
Yeah. Button Man.
Button Man's great.
Not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of rough. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what I was going to say.
What?
Nothing.
What? Say it.
I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it. Because I just don't want to. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to change the subject entirely. I'm going to say something else.
Okay.
You know, this movie came out recently by Ari Aster called Eddington.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes place like right in the beginning of the pandemic, basically. Like, some weeks in, like it's basically far enough in where people are supposed to be wearing masks, and there's like a line to get into the grocery store, and you can only have certain amount of people in at a time, and the social media stuff is happening, and it takes like this. None of this is spoiler alert stuff, but like, you know, George Floyd is murdered. Like all of it's like that era of 2020.
Yeah, so like June or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it came out. Well, the short story is it's a brilliant movie. It's just so it feels like it's going to be the best movie of the year. There's other movies I also really love this year, but it's just so good. But like, I just remember when it came out, there was this sort of discourse about whether or not it was like too early to really look at that time period in our life. And like, this story is like also in that time period.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously the murder happened like right away, but just like the investigation, and, you know, she's like has to look at the, you know, I mean, I guess
there's the Zoom, like you watch the thing through
all
the
this
Zoom.
stuff,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and it's, you know, I personally on the like Ari Aster Eddington discourse landed on the like, is like the perfect time to sort of look back at that, because it's just like
you still remember everything. You still just like, it's still evocative, like still very evocative, like, you know, and tangible, and you remember so many specifics, but it does feel like a lifetime away. I mean, it's like the most insane thing. Like, it's an unbelievable, like crazy, for a lot of people, once in a lifetime event. Probably not for like younger people.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
It's gonna happen
Fingers
again.
crossed, it's not gonna happen again. But I mean, it was
guaranteed 3-4 more.
But like, you know, that was a pretty crazy. That's some crazy shit.
Yeah, and it's like so almost abstracted, and just all the, you know, and then Eddington really, this didn't get into it in this story, but just like all the misinformation and the echo chambers of everyone's political thing that they're tapped into, and like, I don't really have anything interesting to say except for this story just feels like such a product of that, you know, like this guy who freaks out, and like we're all isolated and on lockdown.
Well, everything's
but people
like a
just
pressure
also want to be
cooker.
alone by themselves out in the woods, and they'll wave and say hi and check in at 6 p.m., but also don't be next to me.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much of a parallel between the people who gravitate towards that type of like rough camping.
Yeah.
And like sort of the social experience and strangeness of what the isolation of what the pandemic created.
Yeah.
And then also what's weird too is like everything was a pressure cooker. It wasn't just like, so that's weird. A lot of people were isolated. A lot of people were stuck inside in really bad situations.
Yeah.
You know, like abusive families, or like things that like kind of could diffuse over time that just didn't diffuse. And like, you know, kids falling way far behind while you're trying to do school online, while your mom's trying to work online, you know, like it's like it was like, you know, this guy, Greg Lynn, probably seems like he blew off all his steam by being alone in his car and being an absolute fucking insane person.
Yeah.
And then just going off and camping by himself. He didn't have any friends. So like, what would be torture? Being locked in your house for months, not being able to leave with your wife and kids. Like, that's a pressure cooker in and of itself.
Right.
Like, take away the murder. A guy like that is just going to be like, I made everyone a checklist and you all have to do the checklist. Like, that's insane. Anyway.
Yeah. It's just so specific, you know?
I do remember, this is something that I always remembered. Oh God, I think it was like, don't quote me on this, but it was just something that stuck out for me. It's like earlier in the pandemic when we were in all these lockdowns, I believe it was in some area in Indonesia, or like a national Indonesian campaign, I believe, that was trying to combat a spike in domestic violence during the lockdowns by reminding women that they still needed to like that it was important to get up, get dressed and put on makeup.
Wow.
And I just was like, the levels of like what the world is right now is just like so crazy. I'll see if I can find that. But I remember just being, I mean, it definitely sparked a lot of outrage, and people were like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Yeah.
Like, I mean, public, like it was just like,
yeah, it's a nightmare. Yeah.
Women from this country, which I believe was Indonesia, were like blasting the government's social media, being like, "I am not gonna fucking put on makeup and do my hair," you know. But
right, and it's not.
It did not go quietly.
That's not the reason why I'm being abused in my
exactly.
house.
Like
I'm not cute.
Yeah, it didn't. It definitely didn't carry like it didn't. It was a huge mistake, but just the idea that was what governments were just doing to fix problems.
I just read a thing today that high school seniors are at their lowest reading in like 30 years.
I mean, that makes sense. Reading's weird, man. I feel like it's like you don't get into it and keep into it. Like I did a ton of reading as a kid. I was just a huge reader, and I don't read that much anymore. I mean, I read books for this
You
podcast.
read so many books for your job that
I don't really recreationally read anymore. Like I don't read any fiction anymore. I haven't for a very long time.
Yeah. I'm sort of in and out of it over the years, but I'm definitely
You're
out
a good
of it.
reader. But
I'm okay.
the thing is, I am a great reader, but I did start really like my thing is that I was a great reader from a young kid through high school, and probably doing plays helped a lot with that because you're also reading supplementary stuff when you get a script, at least, you know, whatever.
Yeah, and you're asked to analyze it.
Yeah, and like the only honors classes I could get into were like English. You know,
I want to say that, and Muriel will hate this, but we took an English class together in high school, either junior or senior year, and Muriel was by far the most articulate, smartest kid in class by like so much. Like you were easily the smartest one. It was no questions asked. It was kind of embarrassing.
Well, that's really sweet. I'm not gonna get mad at you about
Okay,
that.
good. I just want you to accept it.
Okay, I accept it, but I also don't read as much. My point is that it's rough when the pandemic hit and you're not reading, and also being traumatized at the age that you would maybe be like becoming a great reader or discovering books or discovering stories.
Instead, you're just learning how to scroll.
Yeah, instead you're doom scrolling, and like that's just the nature of what happened, and you know, it's just. Without blaming anybody or anything, like what a horrible, it's going to be hard to regain that. You know what I mean? Like you're going to have to come up with that like youthful enthusiasm much later to try to like, and then just like how long it takes to build a vocabulary and like build a sense of like critical thought. Like all of that stuff happens in those years when you start to understand how to read a story and metaphor and like, you know, all the elements that go into kind of...
You literally have to read books when you're young so that your mind knows how anything works.
Yeah, it's just like, it's such a...
Like any concept, like any abstract thing, anything that's
it's
bigger
that.
than just like, how do I eat and survive and make money? Like if you're trying to do anything outside of basic get through this society...
Yeah, right.
If you're trying to like... have any expansion in any way, you literally have to read novels.
Well, it's like that is the idea, abstract thought, right? And like that type of work, it's not just like, oh, I'm well read, or oh, I read the classics, or oh, you know, I had exposure to Shakespeare when I was younger. It's like literally the type of thinking that makes those pages come alive and to feel like you're going, like that use of imagination and that exercise of sort of like
different points of view, all this
just this very expansive, like like tangible literal work, but just like kind of more critical thought, you know, and roundness of that. And it sucks because it's like, it's not to say like kids who are graduating from high school are not going to be able to regain that. Absolutely they will, you know, if they need to. It's not like it's impossible, but damn man, losing that chunk of time, like when you're an idiot and you're 14, you're like, I'm gonna read all the Stephen King books. Like I did that. I spent a summer, I read everything Tennessee Williams ever wrote because I was a fucking dramatic teenager. You know what I mean? Like those things.
Of course, I read Charles Bukowski as like a sophomore.
Yeah. Like you're
Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah, right. Kurt Vonnegut was another one. Just like you're just kind of like flailing around, sort of trying to be edgy and like figure things out, and you're following themes. It's like nothing else does that, you know. And it's a way to feel like an adult, you know, by reading these harder books, and then you want to know more, so you learn more vocabulary, and like you're like,
you have to be searching for the next thing. Like when you're 12, you need to be reading the books that are showing you what like 16-year-olds are doing, and when you're 16, it has to be what are the 20-year-olds up
and
to?
when
like,
you're 14, you're reading ones that you shouldn't read unless you're an adult, and then you can't ask your parents questions because they're gonna be pissed.
And then
you're
you
reading
turn
the sex
25
scene
and
from
you're
that
like, ooh, let's read Harry Potter. Let's go back to being a child. Like, that's the point of it all. You know, it's like you're a grown-ass adult. You go read some kids' books.
I remember reading Even Cowgirls Get the Blues for the first time. And I was like,
I remember that title, but I definitely didn't read it. I don't know what that is.
I mean, I was in over my head. I was probably 18, in 8th grade. There's a threesome. There's a threesome in it. And I just like...
Does it go well?
I mean, it's not about whether or not it goes well. It's like I couldn't even even really comprehend. They're just talking about like melons and like acting like a hungry monkey, and I was just like, what the fuck is this? I like literally like the imagery was too complicated for my brain because I had no frame of reference. I'm like, actual melons, like they're. And that was one thing. I had this book. I just had it in my room. I was like, damn, I could not tell my parents I'm reading this.
That's tight.
Yeah. Anyway, that's it. Have a great
Thank
day.
you for listening to our true crime podcast. God bless you. Thank you.
Stay safe out there.
And good night.